Hi everyone, I still can't get used to this theme song, even if I heard it like 10 times. So, hi everyone, today we will talk about developers and accessibility, a very, very important topic. I have my incredible guests here, speakers over there and over there too. And yes, so how are you everyone? Sound check, are you all there?
Yeah, doing great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we have
Doing
Neil,
well.
Shruti, and Crystal. So, as I said, this will be a very special episode because it will be about also bragging. Let me share my screen for a while. Now I'll force everyone to just stay here for a while and just want to really share this. By the way, hi everyone. I love the intro. Amazing. So many people are here already. So it has been a kind of crazy week, last one, because we announced finally our seed round. So we raised $11 million in seed round. We also have been featured on almost 20 publications. We have been published as a featured article on TechCrunch, which is a very, very important website for tech. And we went crazy on social media, swag boxes, social media contest. You can win a Lego set. Go check the pinned tweet on the daily.dev Twitter account. That's it. So I'm super happy to celebrate also this Analyst stream. And yes, perfect. So let me stop here. So as I say, today it will be about accessibility, and we have here Neil, Shruti, and Crystal. So let's see, also Shruti is already in the chat, and everybody is here. So how does the monthly dev works? The monthly dev is a series, unsurprisingly monthly, when we have 2 or 3 speakers, we have a main topic, and it lasts for about 1 hour and a half. So all the talks will be around 30 minutes. We'll have 25 minutes and then 5 minutes for the Q&A sessions. Very easy. So I think that we can start. Let's start with Neil, and bye Shruti and Crystal. Let's stay with us and see you later. Bye-bye. So let's remove and remove. Okay, Neil. So welcome. You are the first guest of this episode. And would you like please to introduce yourself, and then we're ready. You can also share your screen, and then we can start. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm definitely not a dev. I'm a historian by background, but I am a technologist and have spent the last couple of decades working with technology to include people with disabilities. And my day job now is as head of accessibility for Atos, which is a really large European systems integrator. So we have about 110,000 employees in 70 odd countries. And I do the governance and provide all of the policy and services for the group. And so I'm not here to teach you how to code accessibly, but I am going to tell you a story, which I'm going to share with you. And that story is how we treat exclusion like pollution, because this really encapsulates our approach to accessibility. So a little bit more about me. I'm dyslexic, ADHD, so I've been using assistive technology for over 2 decades. So accessibility really is part of my daily life.
Nice. Thank you. So, of course, you are more than welcome, maybe even more, because we really care about trying to give, as you say, a different perception of what accessibility should be. So, yes, I don't want to steal more time from you, Neil. So, when you're ready, you can start sharing your screen. And just a reminder that you can drop your questions, put this in square brackets with a Q to make my life easier. And yes, so treating exclusion like pollution. I like the title, O'Neill. So really, best of luck, and see you in around 20-25 minutes. Okay.
Super. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Bye bye. Good luck.
So thank you for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to speak today, because I think working with the dev community is extremely important. So basics of accessibility, and what is it and why we're doing it. About 15% of the global population has some form of disability. It's the only diversity group you could join at any point in your life. 1.3 billion people, according to the World Health Organization. And the population is growing. We follow, within my own organization, the UN definitions of disability, and we treat disability as a sort of combination of impairment and situation. So the impairment in itself may not be disabling, but when you combine that with the situation, that's when someone ends up being disabled. So it's really important for us as a large organization that we do this for ethical reasons. Yes, it's legal obligation. It helps us differentiate ourselves from our competition, but of course it makes common sense. When we make accessible products, they are better products. We're making stuff that everybody can use. We have better reach, better profitability, greater success. But let me tell you this story, because this is the story of how we sort of got into the mindset of accessibility within my organization. So when you think of sustainability, do you think about windmills, solar panels? Do you think of the environment and decarbonization? Because that's what most people associate sustainability with. So I'd like to think about the link between sustainability and accessible and inclusive tech. Child born in Japan in 2007 has more than a 50% chance of living past the age of 107, and that's quite some rare old age. But they're not alone. Whilst Japan is the most super-aged society in the world, many developed nations, people are going to have similar odds of living to that age. Life expectancy continues to grow at the same rate of 2 to 3 years every decade, as it has done for the last 150 years. Pretty much every country in the world is going to have lots of older people. And why is that important? Well, when you get octogenarians and centenarians as a large proportion of your population, and you realize that most disabilities are acquired as people age, suddenly you're realizing that you're dealing with a rapidly expanding market. So why not design for your future self? Why not code for your future self? Older people and people with disabilities are workers too. They're working for longer, some because they want to, and others because they have to. Some people enjoy working, some people don't. But the reality is that most of us are expected to work into at least our late 60s full time. Pension ages are rising. People are rioting in France over this right now. And others of us actually don't really want to retire. I've just come back from Thailand. I took this picture in Thailand. This lady, obviously happy and working into old age. But lots of people who acquire disabilities as they get older. I need glasses. I'm a little bit blurry now, so that you don't get the reflection in my eyes from the ring lighting. But essentially, the likelihood is that you'll have age-related degradation of function that would be classified as a disability at some point in your life. And therefore, we need to think about how we deal with this. Modern lifestyles as well, right? These are contributing to an increased incidence of acquired disabilities, such as diabetes. And with diabetes, you can have all kinds of things, including diabetic retinopathy. You can lose your sight, you can lose your ability, mobility, etc. So there's lots of things that come as symptoms of health conditions that could impact your ability to carry out your day-to-day activities, how you live. And those day-to-day activities are really now dependent on being able to use digital tools. So it's imperative that we enable people to be independent so that they can be economically active and participate in society throughout their lives, right from early education and lifelong learning, because we never stop these days, into older age. Technology is fantastic. I'm a big fan. It gives people the options to work and study in ways that suit them. I've just spent the last 4 weeks very remote working from the Far East in Thailand, where they have fantastic 5G, by the way. It puts our fiber networks to shame. And more than that, technology has enabled me to get an education and have my job today because it's enabled me to do things that my disability would have prevented. Augmented reality gives us opportunities to support people with cognitive and vision loss. So, for example, this Allcam device, one of my team members uses this because it has optical character recognition as text-to-speech. Now, whilst you can get that on a computer and on your mobile phone, often you want something at a fixed distance. And whilst a lot of documents are these days digital, there's still an awful lot of paper, especially when you're dealing with government. So the really important stuff, not your shopping, government still sends you paper. So you need these kind of technologies to enable you to interact with the world. 3D printing. This really is something that excites me. It's delivering the prospect of personalized and localized accessibility solutions for people. For my own podcast, Access Chat, I interviewed a guy called Felipe Betancourt, who is in Colombia, and he calls himself the MacGyver of assistive technology. He has been creating blueprints for simple assistive tech that he then distributes. And in Colombia, the local libraries, even in the jungle, have 3D printers. So people are able to then 3D print their own basic ergonomic devices and assistive tech. Further than that, he's also using recycled plastic spools, so he's having a double impact in terms of helping people and doing good work for the environment. Smart devices, right? Everybody's got one these days. You know, whether it be Google Home, Alexa, or Siri. Hopefully I've turned everything off so they don't come chirping at me. They're part of our day-to-day lives, but they can be transformative if you have physical and mobility disabilities, and also transformative for people who struggle to type or whatever. So voice interfaces, getting better and better with ChatGPT, etc. If you are reliant on physical carers to be able to get up, get dressed, feed yourself every day, the likelihood is you're not going to have someone around all day. If you want to change the channel on the TV, interact with someone, send an email, you're reliant on someone else. Or you can use this technology. So home automation through smart devices can enable you to turn the heating up, change the lighting, change the channel on the TV, communicate with people. Really life-changing stuff, really giving people autonomy. So new technological and economic models can really empower inclusion in society, and accessibility puts customers, students, employees, you and me in control, sometimes for the first time ever. And I really love this Xbox adaptive controller, not just because it enabled people to play games, but it's a really great example of inclusive design, especially the box, because actually the box is the best bit for me, because the box has been designed inclusively as well. So people with low mobility the users of the product can set this up themselves. You can open this with one finger or one toe. At the same time, society and organizations are still making hurdles for people to jump over before they can really realize the potential of technology and their own potential as individuals. inaccessibility effectively closes the door on people's talent. If they can't use technology, they can't work, they can't participate in society, they can't contribute. Poor accessibility directly impacts the employment prospects of hundreds of millions of people with disabilities around the world. And that has a halo impact on their friends and families. Underemployment is unnecessarily burdensome on the individual, the societies, and the economies that they live in. And as people that are making digital tools, you can help be part of that solution. So I want, my organization, Atos, wants to build a future where everyone can participate. So how is accessibility, the stuff that benefits individuals, linked to sustainability? Because it seems a little tenuous at the moment. I've made a couple of clues. Well, one of the godfathers of accessibility, a gentleman called Jim Tobias, observed that inaccessibility is kind of like pollution. And this for me was a real light bulb moment. I had the epiphany and was like, yeah, this makes sense. You know, essentially when you make something and you exclude someone, or you pollute when you're making something, that's a negative externality. And there are frameworks to deal with pollution, and we want to apply them to accessibility. So if you think about smog, it's the conventional view of pollution. It's this negative externality. Because when you've not included those environmental costs, the costs of cleanup or actually built in cleaner processes, society pays, individuals pay. They are footing the bill, not the companies that are selling the products and the services. And that's what's called a negative externality. Poor accessibility is also an externality in the production and planning process, whether that be the physical environment, like the picture with this lady, or in the digital environment. It's a kind of pollution. And it's unnecessary because we can plan it out, we can code it out. At the same time, not all externalities are bad. When you design inclusively, you create possibilities and benefits for a wider population. So we call this the curb cut effect, and you'll be familiar with the curb cut, right? Designed to help wheelchair users cross the road and get back onto the sidewalk or pavement. At the same time, this helps parents with strollers, people that are delivery drivers. Additional benefits, that's a positive externality. At the moment, society is paying a really high price for the negative externality of inaccessibility, and it requires organizations and individuals to play their part to address this. And whilst there are laws, and there are increasing laws, we just updated our policies in the last few weeks, a process that we go through every couple of years. We found 292 pieces of legislation in the countries we operate in that reference disability inclusion or accessibility or disability employment laws, where if you make inaccessible products, you're excluding people from employment, so therefore it's illegal. So all of that is really helpful, but it's not enough because we need frameworks, because laws in themselves don't mean anything if they're not applied properly, right? And we need frameworks just like we needed for light bulbs, and I'll explain why. Incandescent light bulbs are a great example of something that creates a very negative externality. Yeah? They create light by being inefficient. They're so inefficient that they glow hot. Right? They were cheap though, and they were everywhere. And at the same time, LEDs used to be really expensive. So how did we resolve this negative externality? Well, it came about because of a combination of the legislation, regulation, and also giving a timeline for businesses to allow industries to adjust. So you set the expectation that something's going to happen. You say you must do it, but then you give organizations time to plan to do it. And as a result of that, now LEDs are cheap to buy and run, and no one really wants incandescent bulbs anymore. I'd like to get to the same point for inaccessible products. I want to get to the point where no one wants to buy an inaccessible product. So in order for us to do this, we need frameworks that have that balance between the carrots of more customers, better products and the sticks of legislation. So we have an established framework for dealing with carbon emissions, and so we could take a similar approach when we apply it to inclusion. And in fact, disability inclusion is embedded in the UN Sustainable Development Goals: 4 for equal and inclusive education, 17 monitoring for disability disaggregated data, try saying that twice, promoting inclusive economic growth, creating accessible cities and green public spaces, and emphasizing the social and economic and political inclusion of persons with disabilities, all of which can't be done these days without being digital. So we need this sustainable approach to accessibility to open up businesses and markets and support economic growth globally. So we designed our program as an organization to be systemic and transversal because, just like with environmental protection, which we're pretty good at, prevention is better than cure. So we had a mission statement that we want to be the recognized leader and some principles to design, develop, deliver tech that enables everybody to realize their full potential and enables them to contribute fully. And to do this at scale and across our enterprise, because actually what frequently happens is people build an accessible thing, but it's an island of accessibility or a pocket of heroic effort when everything else is inaccessible. And we want to work in partnership with business and social partners, so charities, specialist organizations, our customers, our suppliers, etc. Lead with transparency as well. So we do reporting on this. So we're not perfect. We're a work in progress, but we report on inclusivity every year, and it's published at the same time as our annual results in the same document. So this means we take an approach that's an ESG approach. So you might have heard of sustainability. These 3 letters, environment, social, and governance, are often now used when we're talking about corporate social responsibility and sustainability. So accessibility is a social topic, but in order for us to be successful at scale in a very complex organization that has thousands of products and multiple combinations and hundreds of thousands of employees, we need good governance, right? And we measure our ESG through relevance to stakeholders and impact on ourselves, and that's what's called a materiality analysis. People often say, well, is accessibility a technical issue, or is it a CSR issue, or actually is it HR? And so what we did was we drew this Venn diagram, which you can see on the screen here, which shows us an intersection between the various different topics. You know, we have our shared values as an organization. So we have our purpose. We're French, so it's actually a raison d'etre, which is looking at planet and people, and we're a public company, so we have to make profits. Profit's not bad, and I want to make more profit from doing good things than from bad things. We then have reporting and compliance. All 3 aspects of the organization need to do that. And then we have accessibility impacts our culture and our employee experience. So we work with HR and diversity on that, because accessibility is part of diversity. And then it's a social good. But in order to do this sort of systematically, we wanted to go a bit further. So we followed the stuff that we're good at within our organization. And we're really good on the reporting on sustainability. We're one of the world's most sustainable companies, named in the top 50 globally. And so we were looking at decarbonization. And we've got a structure and a framework and management culture and an employee culture that knows this stuff. So what did we do? Well, we decided that we wanted to apply that same 3-scope approach to decarbonization to how we dealt with accessibility, because we don't just make our own products. We're a systems integrator. We buy products, we integrate stuff, we help people manage things. So there are different aspects to what we do. Direct impact. So where we do make stuff, we want to design and produce accessible. Where we're buying it, we have a procurement policies and processes put in place to look at how we can work with our suppliers to make their products more accessible. And then in the wider world, influence the value chain, including upstream and downstream. So suppliers, customers, third-party organizations, standards bodies, etc., to influence the world to try and make more accessible products and services. And a really good example of where we managed to bring the two things together, and this is where I'm really passionate, was in our eco-branding. So you'll notice we're in dark mode. When we rebranded, we went through an exercise to look at how we could make our branding more accessible. So we looked at various different fonts. We chose Railway because it worked in 78 languages, including Cyrillic, and we were looking at legibility. And we wanted dynamic system fonts and so on and so forth. So we chose Railway because it was a reasonable compromise in terms of accessibility, availability, language support, etc. Then we also looked at the color palette. So we made sure that our color palette for headings and so on met color contrast requirements. And then we have a light mode, because when you're in dark mode, the last thing you want to do as an environmentally conscious company is print out loads of black ink. So that meant that we were saving energy and being more accessible. So we were reducing two sets of negative externalities at once. And we continue to work in this way with our products. Accessibility has benefits for us. We're looking to ensure compliance, support our aging and disabled workers and customers. Our working population is aging. Whilst we recruit younger people, we still have a large cohort of older workers that are working longer. It improves our employee well-being, because there's nothing more frustrating than hard to use or inaccessible products. When you're excluded, you're likely to feel sick or go absent. We're reducing absence, it enhances efficiency, and it helps us to retain talent. So these are real, tangible business benefits that come about from us taking this approach towards accessibility. But the program is also about wider inclusion, and we believe that this is a trigger for cultural change within our organization. So we want to get to a point where we have a fully inclusive organization around creating belonging and safe space. So whilst you can have segregated groups that are specifically accessible or insertion through special programs, what we want to do is make the whole of our organization an option for people with disabilities, so they can choose their career path and not have it determined for them. These are the main things that we look at: inclusive business growth, operational excellence and compliance, and that connected ecosystem. So various different areas that we address through these. We need to train and empower and support our employees. We are active in loads of professional organizations on accessibility: International Association of Accessibility Professionals, W3C, various different other organizations, and we led the work to create the first digital accessibility specialist apprenticeship standard in the UK, and it is open source. So if you're in a different country, please go take it. It's not stealing, it's what we want you to do. And then training people up, making sure we look at our portfolio, looking at the whole communications piece. We're not there yet. No organization is, but we're working on it. So final thought: often people say accessibility is too hard. It's time to reframe it, because actually if you swap the word accessible with awesome, who's going to refuse to be part of something awesome? So thank you for listening to me for the last 20 minutes or so. I hope that whilst I haven't given you code snippets, I have given you some food for thought.
Thank you so much. Neil. Can you hear me? I hope yes.
Yes, I can.
Nice. Okay, perfect. So thank you. It was an incredible presentation. Also, great point for using the captions, of course. I will go straight to the questions because we have many. So let's go faster. So first one, this is for me. Will there be a recording for these sessions? Yes, we're on YouTube and we are keeping, of course, this super valuable information. So for sure, this is the link. Now, Tobiloba gave many questions. So, do you think accessibility should be hardware focused, software focused, or both?
More than that, environmentally focused, mentally focused, the full ecosystem. So you can do stuff in hardware, but you also need to do stuff in software. Really, accessibility standards are about interoperability. So good code ensures interoperability with the hardware or the assistive technology software.
Nice, thank you. We have many from Tobiloba. Is also it's a great. So
they already are.
Yeah,
they already are illegal in many countries. It's just not enforced. But that's coming. So, for example, with the European Accessibility Act, there will be enforcement. It's up to each of the individual countries to set up their enforcement bodies, but the law is already in place. There is a transition period that is underway now, and there will be enforcement. So I think it's a matter of time before you see this really filtering through.
Yeah, I think it's like when there is like a public building and there are just the stairs and the people with disabilities can't access. So I think that, yes, that's it. Now, another one. Can you give a scenario where you struggled with usability of a software, maybe a website, due to inaccessibility? Only one.
Daily, every day. Actually, I struggle with cognitive accessibility, which is a usability issue as much as anything. All collaboration tools are a complete hellscape for people like me because of the notification overload. So Microsoft had an Ability Summit last month, and they launched a whole set of guidelines around cognitive accessibility, and there's an awful lot of work to be done there right now. But that's one, and finally the other thing is spell checking in something like PowerPoint online. When you're sharing documents, it breaks because it picks up the language of your colleagues in different countries. So you can have one slide that you're collaborating on with 15 different languages, and as someone that's reliant on the squiggly red line as a spell checker, that breaks accessibility for me.
Nice. Thank you. Let's go to the next one, and then we will go with Shruti soon. Can you name some highly sufficient motions that you think will proliferate accessibility across industries?
Well, collaboration, so working with organizations, so things like the International Labour Organization's Global Business Disability Network, the W3C, really promoting accessibility standards. Those are really important. But then actually shareholder and procurement actions. One of the real drivers for accessibility, and I can give a good example where procurement changes how companies have policies, is we were buying executive education from a very prestigious university that didn't do accessibility, and we refused to sign the contract. And as a result of that, that organization put in place a director responsible for accessibility and a program. And whilst they're not perfect, I think that's a really great driver. So each organization, through their own policies and through their supply chain, can impact accessibility.
Nice. Thank you so much, Neil. We have no more time for the questions. Just want to say that many people appreciated this, of course, in the chat. Let me highlight this for a while. Thank you so much. Wave, very good. Thank you so much. Shruti is also active in the chat. Amazing, great chat, and many more compliments also during the presentation. So thank you so much, Neil. It's now time to invite Shruti. Bye-bye.
All right.
Shruti, we made it. Finally finally we have this, and yes, so Shruti is a software engineer at Slack, if I'm right. So
Yeah.
please, Shruti, introduce yourself. I really can't wait for your presentation. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Francesco, for having me. Hey, everyone. My name is Shruti Kapoor. I am an engineer at Slack. I build accessibility of huddles in Slack. And this talk is really special to me because when I started building accessibility in Slack, in the huddles feature of Slack, I kind of had this moment where there was so much knowledge, or there was so much like information, and it almost felt like information overload in accessibility. So I wanted to create this talk to kind of like really simplify the accessibility knowledge for developers who want to create web apps and ensure that they are accessible at the same time.
Nice, thank you. And when you want, you can also share your screen.
Okay, I am
and
sharing my
then
screen.
and then you can start. Thank you so much, and thank you so much also for being active in the chat in the previous talk. Just a little shout out. We use Slack in daily dev, and we're proud of saying this. So this is another thing that maybe, I don't know, we can make even more collaborations. So we use it
Awesome.
professionally, and that's it. Let me write. So Shruti, again, 20-25 minutes, and then we have a Q&A session. Best of luck creating an accessible web together in 5 ways. Love it, the title. Bye.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. Waking up early if you're in PST like me. If I talk like a zombie, that's because it's 8:30 a.m. and I'm not a morning bird. So in this talk, I am going to talk about 5 simple ways that you can keep accessibility in mind when you're building your web application. As developers, we care a lot about building performant web applications and creating an amazing user experience, making sure our designs are pixel perfect, padding is right, color is right. We put a lot of effort in building the website fast and pretty. But if people can't access your fast and pretty website, then it's good for nothing. Accessibility is often left as an afterthought in the software development cycle. We build our UI, we create our features, and when it's time to ship, we realize like we need to do an accessibility test, and we find that our site is not accessible, and we do like a hacky slap of accessibility in the site, and oftentimes end up in a situation like this where we wanted to build a ramp, but it was so last minute that we put these hacks everywhere and they become inaccessible. So, in this talk, I will talk about the 5 simple things you can keep in mind while building web applications to avoid a last minute hack like this. I'm Shruti Kapoor. I have been building accessible web applications at Slack. I have really enjoyed this experience of building web applications, making web applications accessible. I also realized that I had a lot of knowledge gap in this area. And so through this talk, I want to share those 5 things that I learned that helped me keep accessibility in mind from here on as I'm developing my feature. I also realized that when I built my personal website, I made it as visually appealing as possible, as my design skills allowed me to do. But when I did an accessibility test, I found out that I had made a lot of mistakes. And through this talk, I want to share some of those things that I learned on the way, so that you can avoid similar mistakes in your web development and keep accessibility in your mind while you're developing. If you've been following me on Twitter or anywhere, you already know that I love dev jokes. So it's time for dev jokes. So the way this works is I'll ask you a question, and I have the chat open right here. So you can put the answer of the question in the chat. Okay. What did the process say after working in an infinite loop all day? Put your answers in the chat. It doesn't have to be right. Kill me? Okay. Overflow. Ooh, I love it. Kill me is a good one. Burnout condition, I like that. The process said, I need a break. Okay, if you want more dev jokes, you can go find me on Twitter. That is where I share all the dev jokes. There's also a GitHub repo, which I'll share on Twitter as well. So, in this talk, this is what we're going to be talking about. We'll talk about accessibility 101. What is accessibility? What does digital accessibility mean? And checking if your app is accessible. And here I'll share 5 tips that you can keep in mind. Some tools that are available. I know there were a few questions in the chat asking about some tools or like some automated features that can check and give you an accessibility level. So this is the place where I'll share that. Some things to keep in mind before you release your feature, and an example of an app that has went above and beyond in ensuring it provides an accessible and beautiful user experience for everyone. So first, let's talk about Accessibility 101. By the way, all of the slides are available on internet already. You can find it here, but I'll also put the link in the chat. Okay, so what is accessibility? Accessibility basically means enabling everybody to use your site, regardless of their limitations, of their disabilities, of the products they use to browse the web, and regardless of whether they're able bodies or whether they have some sort of limitation. So I want you to take a minute and think about the last feature that you developed. Are you confident that anybody in the world can use your website? Could a person with special needs browse your site and can you be confident that they can get to do what the same thing and in the same way and with the same ease that an able-bodied person would? Enabling everybody to use your site to perform the critical actions in an easy way is web accessibility. We often think of accessibility as sort of like this legal requirement that we just have to do and something that only affects a small number of population. But when you build accessibility with accessibility in mind, it benefits everybody. You may have seen examples of this while coding yourself or like in your favorite editor, or when you just turned your computer on and your trackpad dies and you don't have access to mouse and now you have to use your keyboard to get to the login screen. We'll have also seen examples of where building with accessibility in real life helps people. An example of this is, let's say you have to take a suitcase up a flight of stairs and you reach for that accessible ramp. Or when you have to open the door and both your hands are full and you reach for that accessibility button to open the door. Or with closed captioning, especially in the night when you may be watching YouTube and your partner is sleeping, so you need to use closed captioning to watch YouTube. So when we build with accessibility in mind, we help everybody and not just those with limitations. But what does digital accessibility or accessibility in the web look like? People who are using web may use different technologies to read web or to browse through the web. People may use screen readers to read text. People may use screen magnifiers to zoom into the screen to be able to focus on a specific area. People may use selection switches, especially people with motor disabilities, and uses assistive technology to perform certain actions like click on events. People may use head tracker for mouse. And so in order to make sure we're building with everybody in mind, we need to consider the different assistive technologies people are using to browse the web. We can actually access most of these tools on our computers. In Mac, there is the accessibility shortcuts, and it provides access to most of these, and it can help you understand some assistive technologies that people are using when browsing the web. It's not just a nice to have, but it's also a legal requirement. There was a question in the chat if it's illegal. Yes, it is. In the US, we've seen that 1 in 4 US citizens have a disability, according to 2018 estimate. And in the UK, according to the Equality Act 2010, every website needs to be accessible per the WCAG 2.1 AA guideline and needs to have an accessibility statement. So let's talk about what that guideline is, the WCAG 2.1 AA guideline. According to the guideline, it actually gives guidelines to the websites on how to make content accessible to people with disabilities. And the four things that it talks about is perceivable, operable, understandable, robust. And in short, it stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So let's talk about what that means. So perceivable is basically means that your content presented on the screen should be understood by people using assistive technologies. An example of this is providing text alternatives for things like images, using alt images, using alt tags, closed captioning for audio content. This is the principle that specifies that color should not be the only way of displaying information and helps separate background from foreground by ensuring that there is enough color contrast. So basically, people should be aware of the content and the information that is presented on the website. Operable basically means that people should be able to utilize every part of the site's functionality, and not just by mouse, but also by keyboard. It also specifies that your keyboard focus should not get trapped in one part of the website so that people can actually navigate every part of the website. Understandable basically means that people should be able to use it means that people who are using assistive technologies should be able to convert them from text to voice, and people should who are using assistive technologies can also use the learnings they've had on other websites to navigate your website. So an example for that is a navigation mechanism such as skip to content that should appear on the same page on every website. And robust basically means that people who are using assistive technology should be able to parse your code, and it ensures that markup is semantic so that it is easily understood by assistive technologies. There are different types of accessibility needs that these principles target. And some of the examples of those are motor disability, where a person may have a physical disability and have limitations of muscular control. And that basically means an inability to use a mouse, slow response time, or limited motor control. Cognitive disability means that there may be a learning disability and inability to remember large amounts of information, and ADHD is part of cognitive disability. Visual includes blindness, low vision, or color blindness, and auditory includes things like deafness or hard of hearing. So that is an accessibility 101. Now let's talk about how to ensure that when you're building, you're building an accessible web app. So while building an accessibility feature in Slack, I realized that there is a lot of things, but I tried to kind of narrow them down into 5 things, so it made it easier for me to remember, and I'm sharing that here. So the number 1 is semantic HTML, tab index, ARIA tags, role, keyword navigation, and screen reader. So these are 5 broad topics that, if you keep in mind while developing your web application, you'll ensure that you're building accessibility from the get-go. And in short form of this is STARK. And if you need help remembering that, think of this guy, or think of these guys if you're still a fan of them. So in short, it's semantic HTML, tab index, ARIA tags, role, keyboard navigation, and screen reader. And we'll talk about these in detail. So first of all, what does semantic HTML mean? I think we all kind of are aware of what semantic HTML means. So I'll talk about like what basically we should and shouldn't do. So what the first example that I want to give is use buttons for actions. And I'll talk about why that is a problem in a bit. Another example is whenever you're using a link tag, make sure that you're giving an href and not giving a blank link tag, an anchor tag. Whenever you're using an image, give an alt tag. Don't fake heading levels with CSS. And we'll talk about why this is a problem as well. And whenever you're using HTML, make sure that you're using semantic HTML for the purpose that they're intended for example, nav, header, and main. And so we talked about like use a div instead of a button. What do you think the problem with that is? So if you use div instead of a button, the problem is that the screen reader announces it as group. And when a user is encountering a div that basically has like a click handler, the screen reader will say it's a group. So they have no idea that this is clickable. And so they may totally skip it. Another problem is not using correct heading tags. And the problem with that is if you do not use correct heading tags, the screen reader will not be able to tell the difference between a heading 2 and heading 6, and a user may not be able to identify the difference between the emphasis of the text. So basically with semantic HTML, you get free accessibility out of the box. Some examples of that is that if you're using a select element, it'll let you select with space bar, so you don't have to actually build that in. And the buttons can be clicked with enter key, so you don't have to build keyboard accessibility into it. Buttons can also be tabbed into. Another example is navigation. If you use navigation and create a menu with nav element instead of just div elements, you actually get accessibility out of the box because now you can access them with arrow keys of your keyboard. So in short, use correct semantics, you get accessibility out of the box with semantic HTML. The next one was tab index. Tab index is basically used to set tabbing order, and I'll show you in a bit what that looks like in the web page. Firefox actually has a really good example of Firefox actually has a really good tool that kind of help you understand the tabbing order and can help you debug it if you're going through your tab flow and realize that one of your elements is out of the tabbing order. Kind of looks like this. We'll look at it in demo in a little bit. But you'll see here that it has these numbers attached to these boxes, 11 and 12, and that is the tabbing order. So basically, it's telling you that this will be the number 11th element that's tabbed onto. These numbers are actually automatically generated. So when you're adding tab index to your elements, you can add either a 0 or a -1. You can add 0 if you want it to be part of the tab flow. Tab flow basically means that you are browsing the website and you're hitting the tab key to get to the focusable elements. You can add -1 if you do not want the element to be part of the automatic tab flow, but you want to target it with JavaScript. So an example of that would be that you have a big list, or you have like a collapsible menu item, or you have a collapsible box, and you add tab index to the very first item, which is open. And then when you click on that, or when you tab on that, everything else should be open. So then you can add tab index 0 to the very first item, everything else is collapsed. And when you actually tab onto it, then you can use tab index 0 to set it to the rest of the elements that should be open when you tab onto the first element. It is not advisable to use a tab index greater than 0 or greater than 0, because you can actually mess up the tabbing order of the element, and it can interrupt the flow when people are using screen readers. So that's tab index. Then A stands for ARIA. ARIA is basically ARIA attributes, such as ARIA label, ARIA described by. There's actually a lot of ARIA attributes, and you can find the link on it on MDN if you do a simple Google search. But some of the most popular ones that I was able to use and I found helpful were ARIA label, ARIA checked. ARIA checked is used especially for things like checkboxes when you want to signify, or when you want to denote that it's checked or unchecked. ARIA expanded. ARIA has error messages, really helpful when you want to kind of denote that there is a error on the page. And ARIA hidden is useful when you want to hide something just from assistive technologies. Then R stands for role. I put that as a separate one because role was really important. And some of the examples of role is like alert. Alert is something that you can use. For example, you've got a alert box that pops up that can have an alert. If you've got a button and you've got like a div, and if button elements typically already come with the role attribute attached, so you don't need to add that. But for any reason that you need to have a div and make sure that it acts as a button, you can attach the role button to it. There is a caution attached here. It may be tempting to just add divs and add whatever roles are necessary. But if there is a semantic HTML that can do the same job as a role, it's better to use the semantic HTML, for example, button element, instead of attaching a role to it. And finally, keyboard navigation and screen reader. With this, the idea is to make sure that whenever you're using your whenever you're building your feature, it is accessible using keyboard. And the way to check that is by testing using tab keys, arrows, and spacebar. Ensure that the focus stays visible. So when you're tabbing through, ensure that you can see a clear boundary around which element is active. That's called the focus. And when you're using the web feature, make sure that you've got your screen reader turned on so you can actually hear what people may be hearing when they're using the assistive technology. So in short, STARK, semantic HTML, tab index, ARIA attributes, role, and keyboard navigation. So remember that. So finally, it's time to ship your feature. And this is a small checklist that I prepared that you can keep in mind. Remember start, ensure that you're keeping in mind of semantic HTML, tab index, ARIA roles, and keyboard navigation. Ensure that when you are doing keyboard navigation check, your web app is free of keyboard traps and the focus doesn't get trapped in one single element. Ensure that for all of the interactive elements, such as videos, you're providing explicit labels. All the images are using alt attributes. All relevant images are using alt attributes. The decoration images, you can skip that. Multimedia is tagged and appropriate captions are provided, especially for things like videos. The text has sufficient color contrast. There are tools that can help you check this, and I'll walk through that in a minute. And ensure that if you have automation test, you're running automation tests, there's a lot of tools that can help you create automation tests for accessibility. And so let's actually talk about those tools right now. So there are a few tools that can help make it easier to find out accessibility problems and make it easier to build accessible web applications. So first of all, there are some browser extensions. Axe is a great one. Wave is also great. I've used Axe before. It works really well. There are accessibility tools built into the browser, and we'll look into Firefox in a little bit. But Firefox has some and Chrome has some. They're actually found in the accessibility tab of Firefox and Chrome. There are also build tools that you can actually integrate with your pipeline as well. Same as CI tools that can actually help identify GitHub, find issues while you're creating a PR, and those help a lot. Things like JSX Ally and Axcore actually help you point out mistakes or problems within the code itself when you're writing code. So those are super helpful. We use that at Slack as well. So before you release your feature, here are some things to keep in mind. Number one, test accessibility. Make sure that you're using keyboard to ensure that each part of your web app is accessible, that you can navigate them using a screen reader. Remember Stark. Some things that you can check on the app is ensure that it is keyboard accessible using keyboard. Ensure that you are using screen reader to understand what the screen reader talks about. And it makes sense when the screen reader is using when the screen reader is talking about an application about a feature. Ensure that using automation tools, they can help identify issues and they can help point out mistakes before you even ship the feature. And finally, do user testing. These code tools can find out mistakes and find out errors, but this is all in code. Nothing really beats user testing. It's really helpful to see users actually using a web feature and finding out if it makes sense for them. You could have written a semantic HTML code and the code could be perfect, but if it doesn't make sense to a user, the code is not accessible. It doesn't make sense to the user. There are a few ways that you can go a step further by instead of just adding a tab index to everything. And I'm going to show you an example of how Slack actually goes above and beyond. And this is what makes me really proud of working at Slack. So this is a simple Slack, like a channel page. But something that I want to show you here is that you can make this web app accessible in the technical sense by just adding tab index to everything here. And while that is accessible, it may not be the best user experience for a user. So let's say that I've opened this Slack app and I am in the jobs channel and I want to send a DM. So this is what Slack allows you to do. So you can use tab key to actually navigate all of the interactive elements on the page. Oops. So you can see that I'm using tab key and I can navigate to all of the interactive elements on this channel. But then when I keep using the tab key, this little pop-up shows up. And basically what this pop-up is saying is that we changed the way we use keyboard navigation. And the idea is that you can use command, control, left arrow or right arrow to actually move focus between different sections of Slack. And what that basically means is that if you use command, control, left arrow, right arrow, it'll actually help you navigate to other parts of Slack. We'll show you there. So for example, here now we're focused on the jobs, and it'll keep the focus trapped within that area so you can focus on that section of the app. And so if you use command, control, left arrow, right arrow, it'll move focus between different sections of the app so that you don't have to use tab key to navigate between all of these areas. And when you when you're within an area, you can actually use arrow keys to navigate between that area, which you can see here. So I'm using arrow keys to navigate between that area. And another thing that we've added is that if you have a DM and you're sending a DM and you want to edit that, we've got a keyboard shortcut, which is E, and with which you can edit the message. So there's a bunch of different keyboard shortcuts that are built. So basically the idea is that you can make a site accessible by just adding like tab index. It's technically accessible, but think about how you can improve the user experience by going above and beyond and thinking about the common things that people do that can help you improve the user experience of those features. And you can also help people with cognitive disability by helping them stay focused in a specific section and helping them navigate that section better. So finally, we're at the end of the talk, but this is what we talked about. We talked about an accessibility 101, the 4 features, the 4 guidelines: perceivable, operable, robust, of accessibility, and understandable of accessibility, and how you can check your app, whether your app is accessible by checking for 5 things: semantic HTML, tab index, ARIA attributes, role, and keyboard navigation and screen reader. We looked at some tools that can help you go through accessibility and give you a score of accessibility. I realized I didn't get to do the demo of the tool, but if I have time, I would love to do that. Before you release your feature, there are some things that you can think about. The number one thing is to make sure that you're testing for accessibility, you're testing for start, and you're getting it in the hands of users who have accessibility needs and can actually give you feedback, real feedback on how the experience is, and how you can go above and beyond by making sure that you are thinking about the features that the user uses and how you can improve the experience of that. If you enjoy content like this, I also have a newsletter where I send useful tidbits like that. You can find them here, bit.ly/Shruti newsletter. And I can't leave without a final dev joke. So who won the debate for the best variable? I won. Thank you so much, everybody. You can find me on the internet here on shrutikapoor.dev on Twitter, or you can find me on my newsletter. Thank you so much. I think you're on mute, Francesco.
I was giving some compliments. Was basically saying like that I really loved and enjoyed your way. So you've been unlucky, but no, because there is a reason, because I was focused on finding the link of your newsletter, so it's easier because we know developers are lazy, so they want just a link to click. So there we go. We put them in the chat.
Oh,
thank you so much, Shruti. We have a couple of questions, and then we have Crystal. Let's go. I really enjoyed the presentation. Tobilob asks, how proficient can you have you to be with semantic tags so that you can use area labels at the minimum?
Okay, how proficient can you be with semantic tags such that you use area labels at a minimum? I guess the idea is that like just by using semantic tags, you can avoid ARIA labels. So I'll answer that. Let me know if that wasn't the intent of the question, Tobilaba. So I'll answer that as well. But the idea is like you're using semantic tags to kind of build the outline of the HTML and kind of build the semantic of the HTML page. But then you're using ARIA labels to provide more description to the screen reader. So they kind of complement each other. So for example, if you're building like a select element where you like allow users to like select like it's like a drop down, you allow users to select something. ARIA label kind of helps screen readers get more information about what is printed on the UI, whereas semantic tags kind of give you the screen reader or the HTML itself the right tag or the right skeleton to use for that element.
Nice. Thank you, Shruti. And before I forget, some people asked for the link because I think you couldn't share this directly on YouTube, so you can leave the link in the private chat. So I share it. We have this moderation mechanism. So I'll share it as soon as we have it, and also the Neo one if we have it. And yes, and we have one last question, which is how to handle accessibility if you know with Three.js or animation and CSS/JavaScript.
That's a great question, Jeremy, if I'm saying your name right. Animations are actually one of the hardest features to implement with, especially keeping accessibility in mind. So the idea is like thinking about what the feature is doing, especially like, for example, if it's just like something that kind of like slowly slides in when you're, or like slowly slides up when you're browsing through the site, and it's just like simply UI, simply just for something that's just like a pretty feature. People want that animations be turned off, especially for people with cognitive disabilities. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that if they have, you want to provide first of all a preference for people to turn off animations, and if they have turned on that preference, you want to put your animation behind that flag. So you want to only show animations if people have opted into animations. Yeah, so basically for animations, make sure that it's behind a flag where people can turn off animations because it can cause seizures. It's called prefers reduced motion. Yes, that's right, Mihai. That's correct.
Perfect. Yes, I really enjoyed it. During your talk also there were people like helping each other in the chat. So this is a great sign. I really love that. And yes, Jamie, just the very last one, super fast. Will we get any newsletter about accessibility from you? So is the newsletter?
Perfect. Yes, that's a great question. Yes, the link here, bit.ly/Shruti newsletter, that will have our information on accessibility as well. I try to sprinkle like JavaScript, React, accessibility, dev productivity here and there every time. So it'll be a mix, but yes.
Amazing. Perfect. Shruti, thank you so much for your, and of course, we got so many thank you, amazing. So, yeah, I don't have time to show them all. I think we have one by Graham, if I can find it. It was like a chef. Yeah, this one. I want to end with this one. That joke at the end. Chef kiss.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Nice. Thank you so much, Shruti. Now it's time to invite Crystal. Bye-bye. Okay, let's remove. There we go, Crystal. So sorry for making you wait. You are
no
last,
worries.
but definitely not least. I love the tiara behind you. So I did now you have time. No worries for your presentation, and I think that this will be very interesting because it's related to AI, right?
Yes,
so,
it is.
So please first introduce yourself, then we'll introduce your talk, and then I'll let you speak.
Yeah, so I am Preston-Watson, and I'm the Senior Digital Accessibility Analyst at Salesforce.
Perfect. Amazing. And can you remind the title of your talk? You can also start sharing your screen.
Yeah, so let me see if I tried to change my talk from...
I will keep the people engaged even for 30 minutes. No worries.
I went from Keynote to PowerPoint to Google Slides so I could share
Crystal,
captions.
I have literally 10 minutes of me clicking like thank you messages. And now in the chat, if you know, you can help by engaging in the chat. Nice. It was fast. So nice. So chatting your way into accessibility.
Accessibility.
Perfect. So, Crystal, best of luck. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of this one. Don't forget to drop your questions. And of course, best of luck. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. So I am excited to be here today. Yeah, chatting your way into accessibility, AI, and accessible code. This talk actually changed quite a bit yesterday because I got access to Google Bard, and so that kind of inspired me to kind of pretty much rewrite this 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 talk. Let's just say I was up until 1 o'clock last night doing changing this talk because of that. And but first things first, let's kind of, I want to set expectations about what I'm going to speak about in these next. I'm not going to do, my talk is not going to go more than 20 minutes because of the way I changed it, but I want to set the expectations. And so the scope of this talk, what is in scope is using artificial intelligence chatbots to generate code. What is out of scope is moral and ethical implications of artificial intelligence. Those, moral and ethical questions, implications are something that they're highly important. That conversation, if you're on any sort of, like in the news, social media, is very, very, the hot topic. But obviously 20 some minutes, I'm not going to be able to really give attention to any sort of moral and ethical implications, especially when it comes to accessibility. They're definitely there. They're definitely important and need to be thought about, even in just the context of code. But I'm not going to go there because I don't have the time. And mainly, so I'm just going to just stick to just, trying to generate accessible code within an AI chatbot. And so, because I changed my talk, because I got access to Google Bard, what I decided to do is actually kind of go through using Chat GPT and Google Bard, creating a contact form. So just, I don't like to ever assume people know exactly, just because you say a phrase that everyone is, knows exactly what you're talking about. So let's just define each of these artificial intelligent chatbots. So you have Chat GPT, and these descriptions actually were generated by the particular bots themselves. So we have Chat GPT, and that is a large language model developed by OpenAI based on the GPT 3.5 architecture. It is capable of understanding and generating human-like text in response to natural language inputs, allowing for a wide range of conversational and knowledge-based interactions with users. ChatGPT has been trained on vast amounts of data from the internet and can answer questions, provide information, and engage in discussions on a wide range of topics. And then you have Google Bard, and that Google Bard's description is a large language model, also known as a conversational AI or chatbot, trained to be informative and comprehensive. I am trained on the massive amounts of text data. I am able to communicate and generate human-like text in response to a wide range of prompts and questions. For example, I can provide summaries of factual topics or create stories. And something that's interesting, I just like to note, is that the third person versus first person language that the bots are kind of use. So ChatGPT uses third person, very kind of like this, when you talk about third person, the narrator, the person doesn't use, I language to note that they're in, to kind of be further removed from the information it's given, versus Google Bard uses first person and uses I statements at the very end. So as I said, I use both of these chatbots to generate a contact form. And so it was interesting because I had been kind of tooling around with ChatGPT for a little bit. I don't have the pro version, so my tooling around has been a little bit limited, as a lot of times as I tried to get on it in the last week, it was over, it was at capacity, so I would have to wait a little bit. And so, but one of the things that really helps when you're using these chatbots are prompts. Now, when I first started using ChatGPT, my prompts were just all over the place. I used it as what you think like a chatbot do. It's like, tell me this, or do this. And I actually started reading more and more about what kind of prompts would get you kind of information that is needed. There's actually in the Washington Post a couple weeks ago talking about how there are now AI kind of whisperers. So engineers that actually, their whole focus is using prompts to really get, the code and the answers that you want from these from ChatGPT and other chatbots that are out there. So the first thing I did is I wanted to kind of see how put ChatGPT and Bard against each other in how they would handle creating a contact form. So first I kind of looked at what would be a good prompt. I didn't want to go overly into okay, let me try to get the best possible prompt, get the best possible prompts, because I wanted to take it kind of like someone that maybe is a developer who is just hey, I'm using these new tools that everyone's talking about to create code. So I did kind of what I would say a basic a basic prompt. And so the first prompt that I use says, act as a front-end developer. Write code for a contact form that asks users for their name, email address, and allows them to write a message with no more than 20 words. So that was my first prompt. And so there's a lot of info on this particular slide that's coming up, and I also did a screenshot of the code that it generated. So all the text, and I'll read through some of it. It's not all important, but all the text is generated from Google Bard. I didn't add anything, so just to let you know, this is the description and the code that it generates. So Google Bard, comes back with that prompt. It comes back with, sure, here's a contact form that asks users for their name and email address and allows them to write a message with no more than 120 words using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so it printed out what I would consider a pretty basic form, and it goes, and it gives a further, after it printed out the code, it printed out a little bit more description. So it does use semantic code. So it actually uses a form element to do form action, a contact PHP, which it doesn't give you, but that's for you to insert. It does the method and also does it on submit. Then when it comes to the actual labels and inputs, for the most part, this is, because it's such a simple form, I went through and tested this. So one thing I should say for this particular form, it didn't work. So I went in, dropped it in, and tested, because I wanted to go through with screen readers and do some, and also do some keyboard testing. So when I actually, I popped open VS Code, put this form in, and then the actual text area for the message had the code for the submit button. So there wasn't actually a submit button there. So I couldn't. So to the point of being able to kind of test it out, I could test out that yes, I could programmatically reach the labels for the first couple for the name and email forms for fields, but then when it came to the message text area, that was broken. So that was Google Bard with that kind of just default contact form. This is just kind of more code, and I will actually share these slides so you can go dig into it. I didn't want to get too deep in trying to repeat the code back in. This is more just kind of an overview of my experience of trying to get accessible code out of these two chatbots. And then I go to ChatGPT, and so what ChatGPT gave me with this first prompt was like, here's an example of a simple contact form that asks for the user's name, email address, and message. The form will validate the email address. The form will validate that the email address is in the correct format and that the message is no more than 120 words long. So the form gives, again, just like Google Bard, uses semantic code. It doesn't give me, actually, it didn't go as far as Google Bard to give me JavaScript. It just gave me HTML. And as I went through, again, for this, it was perfectly, it's a simple form. It's really hard unless if you're not using semantic code to not have it be accessible. And so, yeah, it was basically these two things, except for Google Bard and whatever happened there, I didn't try to debug any of the JavaScript because that that was out of scope for me at that point. It was fine. The code that it generated was fine. So I wanted to get a little bit more detailed into my prompt. So more code. So I kind of, went a little bit further and kind of improved or, spiffed up my prompt. So the second prompt that I gave it, again, a contact form, states, act as a front-end developer, write code for a contact form that checks information on a form. The form asks for full name, email address, phone number, preferred contact method, and a message with no more than 120 words. All fields are required for the form to be submitted. And again, I wanted to, because at the beginning I just said it really, I knew at that first prompt I was going to just get a basic form. And so with this, I wanted to get a little bit more complicated. And because again, when you're doing, when you're asking these chatbots, you're going to, the kind of expectation is that people can ask for it, developers, engineers can ask for it to do some pretty complex programming and coding. And so I wanted to get a little, for this talk a little bit more complicated than what I was asking it to generate for me. So again, let's go and look at Google Bard. And so Google Bard states, sure, here's your contact form that checks information on a form and requires all fields to be filled out before the form can be submitted. So it did generate another form. It didn't, this time it actually did not give me any JavaScript. It is semantic. There is, so now what ended up happening as I went through, I input it in, and tested it out, locally. And what I found is, there's in the code, there's an image screenshot of the code that it generated, and kind of almost halfway down, there's a label for preferred contact method, and these these inputs for contact method for email and phone that were generated are radio buttons. Now, there was, as I was going through with a screen reader, there was actually some issues with this being announced by a screen reader, and the screen reader I was using was VoiceOver on the Safari browser. And so at one point, when I first kind of tapped through, I tapped through with the radio buttons. I got to the message text area, and it was it actually didn't announce the message area. It announced it as phone. So there was actually a bit of some issues there with this particular form. I didn't do a complete audit and complete debugging of it, but just kind of straight from generated from Google Bard. Though for the most part, everything kind of turned out as kind of expected, not so many issues. That particular those radio buttons actually did have some issues, some kind of like wonkiness that would need to be addressed. And so when I went to ChatGPT, this is what it said. Certainly, here is an example of a contact form that validates user inputs, ensures that all fields are filled in before the form can be submitted. The form asks for user's full name, email address, phone number, preferred contact method, and a message with no more than 120 words. And so with this, again, it printed out another kind of using semantic code form. It's for the preferred contact, preferred contact kind of method. It actually, instead of going with radio buttons, it went with a select, and it did drop downs. For the most part, I didn't, as I went through and using keyboard navigation and also using a screen reader, I didn't have a particular issue with this form that ChatGPT, kind of put out. And for me, and kind of my thoughts on this is that ChatGPT is way more mature than Google Bard. So the level of resources and information it has to pull from right now, just because Google Bard is really only in like 2 weeks of even being public, and the fact that I only got access to it yesterday. So my thoughts is that the level of kind of examples and information that ChatGPT can pull from when it comes to like forms or like this is way more than Google. I know that kind of sounds maybe a little bit weird, just because it's like it is Google. Google has a lot of information, but Bard is really, it's still, as it's labeled, it's still experimental, and there hasn't been a lot of real world use of it as much as ChatGPT. So ChatGPT did put out some JavaScript for the most part. When it came to the error messages for it, I did the error messages. I didn't find any sort of real issue. When error messages came up, the VoiceOver actually did go to the error message to say, fill in this form. So again, pretty, I say a pretty good, like, simple, accessible form. So nothing too concerning or worrying about this. And so here is what I wanted to do. It's like this is my kind of the third prompt. I wanted to see what would happen if I went and told both of these chatbots, I want an accessible form. So this is kind of the third prompt that I gave it. So it says, this prompt says, act as an accessibility developer. Write code for a contact form that checks information on the form. The form asks for full name, email address, phone number, preferred contact method, and a message with no more than 120 words. All fields are required for the form to be submitted. The form must conform to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level AA. And so with this prompt, I didn't, again, it's a pretty basic prompt. Like it's kind of a beginner prompt. Again, I didn't want to go kind of full-fledged AI whisperer because one, I'm not. And so I just really started to learn about how you can really form prompts and versus the kind of like messing around I did previously with ChatGPT. So this is something very basic, but I wanted to see how it would handle me asking it directly, please conform to WCAG 2.1 level A. Please make this form accessible. So for Google Bard, this is what it generated. It says, sure, here's a contact form that checks information on a form. Form requires all fields to be filled out before the form can be submitted and conforms to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level AA. Again, for the most part, it was the same as it gave. It gave pretty much the same code it gave for the second prompt, but now it added ARIA labels. And and as I kind of went through, and I'm like, okay, so it had ARIA ARIA label for the name field, email, all the fields it added, except for the preferred contact. Still was kind of that was still kind of wonky when I tested it on the screen reader, and then for the message text area, it did add. It also added ARIA along with the submit, and that's pretty much what it seems like. That is what Google Bard thinks being accessible is. It's just adding ARIA. As you know, many people may have known, like one of the kind of famous sayings within accessibility is that no ARIA is good, is better than no kind of like bad, it's like no ARIA is better than bad ARIA. And so it is kind of interesting that giving this prompt that it just it goes in and throws ARIA versus trying to do much more kind of semantic way to address to build this form. So this is what Google Bard put, and we'll kind of and then it gives a little, like, the description that it gives kind of goes into it gives a little bit of information, and it says this form uses the ARIA label attribute to provide additional information about each field, which will help users who are using screen readers or other assistive technologies. And then it also so it really pretty much all it does is like, hey, we added ARIA to make this accessible. This will help with assistive technology. Now, the interesting thing came when I did ChatGPT. So the first time I put this prompt in, it says, okay, certainly, here's an example of a contact form that includes accessibility features that conform to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level A. The form asks for username, email address, phone number, for a contact method, and a message with no more than 120 words. So when it started to print out, a form that had so many divs, and I could just, as it was printing it out, I was like, okay, this is going to be a serious issue as it printed out. I don't know, I wonder as it was printing out, I was wondering if it was just grabbing it from some place where it's like, hey, this is an accessible form, which kind of concerned me, as I'm like, okay. And then right after it kind of put out the code, it kind of froze and it stopped. So I didn't get that kind of secondary description of what it had done. So I decided to regenerate and put and ask it again, just kind of like, okay, what happened? So with that, asking it again, it then gave me a different form, and that form is, didn't have any sort of divs in it, completely semantic text, and spit out some JavaScript. Again, added some ARIA labels, because again, it's like, okay, here is how you make this is how you make an accessible form, or anything accessible with code, you add ARIA to it. So it was really interesting to kind of get, to go through with ChatGPT with with this third prompt, where at first it almost seemed like, as it was going through and giving me that first prompt, that maybe, it's like maybe it realized that it was giving me a pretty inaccessible form made with a bunch of divs and not semantic code. But the second attempt did put out something that honestly, as I went through keyboard only, and also using voiceover, was pretty cool. But pretty accessible, no sort of major issues. The error messages were, again, no real concerns. This form out of all the previous two was the most, I say, complex, but again, not really as, not as real. You won't really find many forms like this in the real world, because they're pretty basic, pretty simple, and not something that usually really not customized to what are needed by a lot of companies or organizations. So here are kind of my ending thoughts. I know hopefully I'm not over, but these are kind of my thoughts as I went through these prompts and worked with both ChatGPT and Google Bard. The code is only good as the prompt that it's given. So as I went through these 3 different prompts, you can see for the most part, it put out some pretty kind of default basic kind of example type code, and as I kind of finessed the prompts, it did give a little bit more complexity, but it's only as good as I could give it. Now, had I spent maybe more time in trying to really narrow down, give it a particular stack, give it particular parameters, maybe I would have got something more, I would have got something more robust, even more, when it comes to accessibility, more accessible, especially in the case of the preferred contact method with the radio buttons versus a select drop down field. But it's, again, it really is, for a lot of people who are using these things, they're not, they're not someone they may not be super up on exactly how you need to feed in these prompts to these particular chatbots to get what you need. So again, the code that you get out of these chatbots are only good as what you put in and ask of it, in the way that you ask of it. The more about accessibility you know, the stronger the code that the chatbot can provide. So this is kind of pretty evident of, as I went through, I didn't give any sort of oh, hey, with these particular prompts, I didn't get too much into, this is how these fields need to be. These are kind of the context. In the last prompt, all I said was WCAG 2.1 level AA, and kind of just see what it came up on its own. So really, if you have someone that's prompting these chatbots for wanting accessible code, if the more they know about accessibility, the more they can put in, and that's what you're going to get back from these particular AI chatbots. But the less you know, the less you're going to get back, which leads into my last thought. The unknowns will remain unknown to you. So whenever you don't know about accessibility, about how to code accessibly, what you need to do for certain, for certain components in certain design, design patterns and how to code. If you don't know it, more than likely you're not going to get that from these chatbots unless you're like, it'll give you kind of basic information that's out there. It'll tell you like, oh, this is good for assistive technology. This, but it's not going to give you a lot of these kind of the knowledge that comes with, really digging into and understanding accessibility and how to and how to program and how to code accessibly. So for the thing, kind of just when you're thinking about using some of these chatbots for coding and thinking that this is, by default that, that these, bots are going to be just perfect for making things accessible. It goes back into, it's only as good as the user that is prompting these bots. And kind of my last thought, accessibility is more than design, coding, and testing. There's a lot of fundamental knowledge about disability and how disability is experienced amongst people, how disability is handled, people, how they engage technology and platforms, that really informs on how things are designed, how they're coded, and how you go about testing. And that's something to keep in mind, and that's something that AI bots really can't, are not at the thing, because we talk about these things being of artificial intelligence. And honestly, I think it's more of these, I think less of these bots as a true AI and more of machine like learning. And but even then, it's more of machine kind of building in a way. Don't quote me on that because people will get mad. It's like, these are true AI. AI, machine learning has so much more to go. There's a lot of questions out there that need to be asked. But when it comes to the context of accessible code, just really be careful. If you need some scaffolding in how to approach a component or how to build a particular item, that I think it's a great way to kind of, get that rough draft and then build upon that. But know that you're going to have to do your due diligence in making sure that you are building accessibly, and you have to go out and really, and really get that knowledge and understand what you're doing. And with that, I am done.
Nice. Thank you so much, Crystal. And it was great. We don't have time for the Q&A because we're a bit over time.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's totally okay. It was a super interesting talk. Also putting this on comparison, and we'll see in the future how this will evolve in AI. Because now we think it's AI generated. I'm not guilty anymore. ChatGPT said me to add this, so I have no more responsibilities. And we know accessibility is basically all about responsibilities, like taking care of what we want to create. So we should not forget about this. And yes, so thank you so much, Krista. Thank you so much, Neil and Shruti, for staying until the end. It's not that often this happens. So people really show that they really care about accessibility. I saw many people also helping each other in the chat, which is a great sign. It has been really a pleasure for me to have all of you here. We have so many people, of course. Let's give the 10 seconds to give Krista what she deserves. All the thank you, including Shruti. Really, really interesting one. Talking to outputs of Partner ChatGPT side by side. So, and of course, this is a great quote by Shruti. No, it's Krista.
By Crystal.
Of course. And yes, nice. So we are basically almost done. Let me brag just for 30 more seconds because I want to show you, if I can, just a couple of things. there are two things. One might be also be interesting for you. So again, if you just get into this talk or just not at the very beginning, which it's your loss because Neil talk was amazing. We raised our seed round of $11 million for daily dev. I knew this since December and announced this last week. So I've been waiting with FOMO with all my DevRel friends for so long, and I don't know. Now I feel lightweight. Finally, I can release this info. And yes, we also made some noise on social media. But there is also another thing that I want to share with you. This is super important. If you're still watching, this will be worth because we are giving away 100 Lego sets. These are like real Lego-like sets. You just have to put your setup with daily dev being creative and crazy. So we will announce the winners on Monday. I'll also share the link here. Everyone can participate, included the speakers. So I saw people going really crazy on this. And yes, so this was the last info that I wanted to share. I hope it was worth it if you are still watching. So now you know that you have time until Friday to submit yours. And we are done. So all the speakers, I'm waiting for your submissions for this, and it's a great opportunity. And yes, that's it. Perfect. Thank you so much. If you have some final thoughts, and then we can wrap it up.
Thank you. I really enjoyed both presentations, and I've been playing around a bit with AI image generation to try and do accessible infographics. It's been a catastrophe so far, but I'm looking at creating better prompts.
Nice. So Neil, you said that you enjoyed the two presentations. So which one you didn't enjoy?
I've done it too many times.
Okay. Nice. Sorry, I had to, but Shruti put me in joke mode. Usually I'm more professional, but Shruti put me in joke mode, so this is what you get now. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this, and yes, so see you, and on the next month we will talk about testing. We'll create the event soon. You can subscribe if you're interested, and yes, this will be the episode number 28. Thank you so much for the speakers, and sorry for the bit overtime. Bye everyone, and yes, see you around. Bye bye.